My name is Lori Power. My company is MP Benefits, and I am a group benefit consultant. Each week, I try to engage people in great conversation. It's the best time of my week. I like not just talking to the expert in the room, but I like filling the room with people who have similar questions that I have, and really creating a more dynamic and diverse conversation so that we can actually get the answers that we need to be, in my business, better practitioners from a business perspective for their employees to be able to share that information out. And it's only by sharing that we all grow. And that is the ultimate purpose. So Susana has been kind enough to come in and have another session where we're going to take a deeper dive into what it looks like for Canada Pension Plan disability from somebody who is going through that process or thinking that they may have to go through that process. Susana, can you take a little moment? Tell me about Brematson. Tell me about the bit of history and who you are and why you do what you do.
Yes, thank you so much, Lori. And thank you, everyone, for coming and with your questions. Very great questions. Well, I've been doing this business now for almost 20 years. Prior to that, I worked in the highest ranks of the parliament. I worked with two prime ministers during their administration. And this is where I acquired the knowledge. All this information, all this stuff that I'll be talking about, really the leverage that I have, someone like myself has, was from where we came from. I say we, I always say that in terms of my team. We came from the government, where that's where the laws of the land were created and administered. And so we always have that angle, you know, that insider information, if you will. So much so that because of personal experience, I decided to, you know, create a business out of it. And it's been a great, wonderful, you know, fulfillment for me, because I do have a daughter with a disability. She's 19 now and doing wonderful. And, you know, disability does happen. It's a fact of life. And it's, you know, I guess what you can do with it and what you do with it, that would make the difference. So anyways, what happened in terms of my situation was I had a lady, while I was still working for the minister, I was the special assistant. I worked in the Treasury Board. My background is economics. And of course, I would advise the Prime Minister's office, the staff, and the Treasury Board on all matters pertaining to money, the economics and policy, all those wonderful things. So anyways, here I was working still in the minister's office, and I had a friend of the family who reached out to me, just, you know, very curious, but disgruntled, unfortunately, where her group plan was through Blue Cross. She worked for many years, suffered 3 severe chronic illnesses, and was denied the whole Canada Pension Plan disability. She had hired a lawyer, unfortunately to no avail. So anyways, I guess she got inspired to call me years after her file was closed. And she explained this whole thing to me. And I found that to be a very strange scenario, because like everybody else, you think I have these ailments. My doctor should be able to fill this out. I sign it, and Bob's your uncle. I'm on this thing. It doesn't work that way. I then at that time learned, unfortunately, that hard lesson. So as I, you know, got into further conversation with her, it turned out that I then decided that I would like to represent this lady, help her through the process. And we did. Because her file was closed, I had to get ministerial intervention. That's another thing. Someone of my experience, I guess, that we understand the bureaucracy, so we know how to work the system, if you will. Anyways, we got ministerial intervention. We cracked open the case. I stepped in, represented her. 9 months later, we went to the tribunal, and I won. She couldn't believe it, and I couldn't believe it, because what I had experienced, what I saw, was very disturbing, to be honest with you. Although the government, we pay into these programs, it is not easy to get on them, especially when you are sick, you're dealing with your, medical condition. It's it can be very difficult and daunting, to say the least, you know. So that's kind of where this whole thing began for me. I then, you know, incorporated my business, started working with families all across Canada, and yeah, and I guess what I could do here, now that I gave you guys a little bit of an intro, perhaps I think we can dive into the questions, and from there we will be able, or I will be able to satisfy, you know, your concerns or matters on this topic, and we just kind of flow from there.
Thank you
How's
so much. You know, after our last conversation, and I'm going to go first to Pam's question. After our last conversation where we talked about Canada Pension Plan opening up a special avenue for people who have specifically suffered a disability as a result of the COVID vaccination, so many people thought I was, one, a conspiracy theorist, or two, that it doesn't really exist. And I found myself sharing just like I had said before, what bothers me so much about this process is people having to constantly defend that they have a chronic condition, that they have a disability. Shouldn't have to tell anybody, right? That's between me and my doctor. We understand one another. Let's move forward. So it's that defense mechanism that, of course, nobody would suffer a disability. Pam's question is, are we seeing more disability claims go through the Canada Pension Plan now as a result of COVID related or long COVID or vaccine implications? Are we seeing, have I asked that all right, Pam? How are we seeing an influx of that?
Yes,
Yes, you articulated that perfectly. Thank you.
yeah, perfect. Yeah, there's an increase on all those points, plus mental health especially. Huge increase. The Service Canada unit, the department, they're very inundated, and with all the COVID, you know, changes that had to be made, has not helped. In terms of, you know, people working from home, and you know, not being technologically, you know, savvy, you know, it has created, you know, backlogs, complications, and such. So yes, it has. We've seen, I've seen an increase in terms of inquiries and so forth, and denials too have, unfortunately, still are high also.
What happens if somebody is approved for CPP disability and then they are no longer disabled, so they'll go off the program? And this is a real fear, how does this happen? Because you had mentioned that sometimes people have that impression that you're going to go on to Canada Pension Plan disability as a result that you are going to eventually die of that disability. But nowadays, people have to apply for that disability if it's a prolonged disability, but they may go off the Canada Pension Plan disability program. How does that impact them when they then age into retirement and want to access just their Canada Pension Plan?
Right. So the Canada Pension Plan, if you're on it and it just happens that your condition improved where you're able to work, for example, and when we say work, we mean gainful employment. You know, nothing part-time, or you know, there is a cap on that, and we can discuss that later. But if you're able to work in terms of gainful employment, it could be what you were doing originally, or it could be a completely different career, but it has to be gainful employment. You can pause it and forever, if you want to use that term, but they will keep your file at bay, archived, where if in the future, you know, depending on what your impairment is, if it, you know, if it comes back, or if you get, you know, to a place where you just cannot work anymore, hence gainful employment, you can get reinstated. Absolutely. So there's that. Now, in terms of your pension, if you are not able to work, so obviously if you're not working, you're not contributing into the system, as we say. By being on Canada Pension Plan disability, let's say you apply, you get onto the program, you are contributing still, perhaps not at a high index level as to where you were before in terms of your full-time employment, but you do contribute. So in other words, you can't work, you're, let's say 57 years old, you cannot work, hence you're not contributing. However, you get onto CPP-D, you do have that window from, let's say 57 to 65, where you are still contributing, where when you become 65 years old, you'll have somewhat of a decent pension versus, almost nothing, because, no contributions for lack of not working. So I hope that answers the question.
Does that help? That answer help?
It does in a way, but when you say gainful employment, would that be going back to 40 hours a week? Is there a limit
Yes,
or a
there is.
minimum? There is,
Yes,
right?
there is. So if you're on CPPD, the government or the program allows you to work and make $5,000 a year. Now, obviously, we all know that's not gainful employment, but anything beyond that, they would start considering that you may show capacity to gainful employment. So you can work, $5,000 a year. What is that a month? $300 a month maybe. But anything beyond that, like $700, $800, $1,000 a month that, you're able to make, what Service Canada will see that as being, as you showing or demonstrating capacity to be able to work, as to what they would say gainful employment.
But it wouldn't necessarily remove them from the program.
Well, if you are able to make, let's say, $5,000 a year or less, you will still continue on the program, up until 65. If you happen to make more, the government will definitely, they'll know, and that will create issues. They'll question, they'll probably want more medical information from your medical practitioner and so forth.
Okay, so working with an advocate would help. Go ahead.
The other thing that just came to mind too is if I'm just speaking in reference because my daughter has applied for that and she's only 27, so she still has a long ways to go to 65. And in the meantime, so if there is a pause and let's say her chronic condition improves and she wants to go back, let's say 30 hours a week, so I guess how would that affect her when she wants to retire her CPP pension? If she's not contributing as much as she would have if she was working full-time and not been on disability, how is that going to impact that?
Well, her pension will be accordingly to what she's contributed.
Right.
Every case is unique, but somewhat in what you're explaining to me, obviously her contributions would be less than if she was working, your typical full-time, 40 hours, for example, versus like a 30-hour or 25-hour. And also there's the pay rate, the scale where you're at. That also plays a factor into what you contribute. So at the end of the day, the short answer is yes, it'll affect the amount her pension will be once she's 65. In other words, her pension will be smaller than whatever that maximum amount would be.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Wendy, can you ask your question that you had before we started? It was really good from an advisor point of view. What next? I'll refresh your memory. I had said as a benefit consultant, we'll get a call. The insurance carriers have somebody on long-term disability, and all of a sudden they get the letter in the mail that says you must apply for Canada Pension Program with no instructions to the how, the why, the what. And it puts us in a situation because it's not like we can step in with Service Canada. That's not something they're going to engage with us on. How best to advise. And if I didn't get that right, Wendy, if you want to pop in after and ask your question, that would be great. How best to advise the employees that work for the employers we serve?
Sorry, my phone just went, sorry. In a situation like that, where the person's on long-term disability and they have to apply for CPP-D, what I've noticed, the status quo is the disability case manager, for the most part, say, here's the application, or you can download it from Service Canada, one or the other, and just apply for it. And the application process really consists of the applicant's part. They fill it all in, and it's quite extensive. There's all kinds of information, personal information that is requested, especially medical information. Then there's the other part of the application, which is the medical, the doctor. The doctor fills out the application. And again, there's requests for reports, the prognosis, the medical condition, and so forth. So usually what should happen ideally is those two parts, part one, part two, should go together, submitted to Service Canada, and then Service Canada does their adjudication. Usually the adjudication process can take up to 3 months. And from 3 months, you can tell, if they're inquiring for more information, hence you may need more information from your doctor, or they may go directly to the doctor, or they may give you a decision right there and then saying yay or nay. Unfortunately, we have learned through the years, it's always been this way, that the denial rate has been roughly a little over 70%. And it's a lot of it is because of the presentation of the application, and also sometimes deadlines that are not met. Doctors are very busy. Sometimes they don't provide medical information, when necessary, and then Service Canada may make a decision, with whatever they have, and the decision, of course, unfortunately, may not be favorable. So there's lots of outside variables outside of the applicant that unfortunately constitutes, a success or not a success. It is a daunting process. It's very long, kind of in terms of the lot of information that they're requesting, many pages. And if you're sick, it's a difficult, scenario, because like Lori was saying, you're going to have to prove yourself again. Like, I have to prove myself that, I need my wheelchair, or, I can't walk effectively, or I can't work, and having to justify and explain yourself.
And
So
people hate those forms. I mean, they hate the forms, the simple forms. And how many times those of us in the room that somebody has to do a medical questionnaire and they don't even respond to the query from the carrier to get them the additional coverage, not to mention that there's a disability involved. So how many times does it go by? Go ahead, Wendy.
And I think that's the frustration, is that the employee who's on disability has already filled out a lot of forms for the insurance company. And, now they're on their disability and things seem to be running along smoothly. And then all of a sudden they're asked to fill out this form. And so they come to the advisor and they ask, well, why am I being asked to fill this out? What is the chances of me getting this in, CPP? And as you said, the denial rate is over 70%. So we're being honest with them and saying, well, the likelihood is not that you're going to get approved for this. And they're like, well, then why am I even wasting my time and going to my doctor and pestering the doctor to fill out this form for something that I'm probably going to be denied for? It creates a real frustration for the employee, and I think for the employer as well, and the doctor.
Oh, 100%. Then it's a domino, isn't it, Wendy? And then it comes back and gets knocking on our door. Good question. Thank you for asking.
I like to add to that, to what Wendy mentioned. Here's the reality to why people are asked from their insurance provider why they got to apply. Because having that person on LTD is a liability. They want to offset that cost. So how do they do that is they get the person, to apply for the CPP-D, and that amount that they will get from CPP-D, that's the amount that the insurer will deduct. the person will still get, you know, let's say $3,000 a month. It's just a little bit from the provider and the other little bit from Service Canada. That's how it'll work. So, you know, summing it all up, it is a frustrating process for the employer because, you know, they're witnessing their employee go through this. The claimant, of course, they're like, why am I having to do this? And now the provider, another element here that's important to understand is the LTD. The reason why the person got approved for LTD to begin with was because they cannot do that particular job, whatever that job was. Whereas Canada Pension Plan Disability, it's any job, even something as trivial, if you want to use that term, of sitting down and licking stamps and getting paid for it. If you're able to do that for 7-8 hours, you're showing capacity. Licking stamps, sealing envelopes, the government will view that as having capacity. So those two concepts or two jurisdictions are very different. So what got you approved for LTD does not constitute at all why you should get approved for CPPD. And with all these elements I'm bringing up, you know, the employer, the claimant, you know, who's frustrated, and of course the LTD eligibility not being the same as CPP eligibility, all these things mixed into this whole situation makes it a very undesirable situation to be in. You know, it's a bad predicament to say the least because the person's
toxic concoction.
It is. And we've seen it. We've seen it with providers. They hire us to step in to do this part of the whole process for them. And we've seen a huge shift in the person's, the claimant who's sick. We've seen a shift in them happy to speak with us. Whereas their disposition, unfortunately, which is the reality, they're not very happy when they get that phone call from, you know, the disability case manager from whichever provider. So, you know, that's the kind of, you know, situation that brews up, unfortunately.
What happens if the employee, and again, this is outside of anybody's choice except the employee, they throw up their hands and they go, you know what, I'm not going to engage in this. I am not going to apply, as you had said and Wendy echoed, with the denial rate being so high. And like, it's a nice thing to have everybody on gallery here, because as soon as she said licking stamps as gainful employment, all of your faces went, you know, like, you know, it was unbelievable to think that that would be considered a gainful employment for somebody who has been a professional in their industry and so on, and had been working gainfully. So what happens in the situation where we find out they're just not doing the paperwork? They've just decided to throw in the towel. I'm done. I'm not doing it.
Right. Well, the person does have a choice, obviously. However, that may, you know, result in repercussions. It depends on the policy that they have with the provider, you know, their group benefit policy. You know, it depends on what that stipulates, and the stipulation may be the provider may cut them off, or, you know, they'll just reduce them of the amount that they think that would be, you know, eligible, that the person would be eligible for. They'll reduce their benefit, their LTD benefit accordingly. So, you know, and those are the realities that the person may have to, you know, come to terms with if they, you know, so decide that they don't want to apply. They do have a choice, but it comes with repercussion.
And I think I can speak for a lot of people. The majority of contracts include that Canada Pension Plan offset within them. We don't really have a choice to not have that in there. I mean, the carriers have put that in as a standardized acceptance. Other questions from the room? Really, this is such a great opportunity for us to take this deep dive.
So if you had a contract that had own OC for the first 2 years, I'm presuming they wouldn't have to do this during the first 2-year period. Correct?
Right. They don't. They meaning the provider, the insurance company, no, because there's that 2-year window where they're trying to rehabilitate the person, trying to get everything, okay, for them to go back, to what they were doing. Sometimes that's not successful for various reasons. So then it goes into any OC, which is the change of definition. And that's usually when, the request is made from the insurance provider to the claimant for them to apply, because now efforts to go back to work have not been successful. Now this claimant is a liability. They want to offset the cost, so they're wanting to get the claimant onto the CPP-D. So change of definition from own OC to any OC, which what they call change of definition.
A lot of our contracts have that 2-year own occupation clause, or the 24 months. So then we can start to educate ahead of time. I think the proactive measure is to educate ahead of time and say, inform your employees if anybody is going on to a disability. Let's add that into that corporate policy so that they're aware ahead of time. I mean, education is so key. Communication, right? Pam, did you have another question that you wanted to ask as well? No, you're good. What are we not asking here from the journey of somebody who is already in, whether that's a physical disability or not, they're still going to be impacted by the mental state of having a disability. So they go hand in hand. What are we not asking about the journey from the employee's perspective in that situation?
When you're saying we? Who's not the one asking? Are you referring to the insurer or the employer, or just generally speaking, like what would be the questions to be aware of?
Yeah, generally speaking, as we strive to do better by our clients to which we serve, if we understand the journey and we understand it better, we will be better informed to talk to the employers, who at the end of the day may be our clients. It may be talking directly to the employees if those situations present themselves in an employee meeting. But really, that deeper understanding of the journey will help us.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I could certainly speak to that. Again, in my experience, what I've observed is, for some reason, the system is set up such that when the person gets to the change of definition, from own OC to any OC, it just seems like that person or claimant, if you will, they just kind of fall off the table. There's not much that they are able to do with them, because now they can't be rehabilitated. Now they're just a liability. And the person basically is kind of left floundering. If they go to their doctor, for example, for support, yes, they may get some support, but when it comes to the actually application process, doctors don't understand. In fact, I would say almost 60%, this is shocking, 60% almost, the doctors are the result why there's issues with this process, because the doctor plays a very important role, as you understand, understandably. So it's imperative that employers, the insurance industry, and sales benefits people, the agents, be aware that in order to exercise social responsibility when it's needed most, when the person is disabled, is a conversation to be had. Yes, we all want people who get sick to be rehabilitated and to go back to normal. We all want that, and we strive for that. And it does work that way for the most part, but there is a percentage where it doesn't work that way for, whatever the condition or reasoning is. And in those circumstances, I believe, and I really feel strongly, because I've seen it, I've witnessed, where there has to be communication, collaboration, and education on this matter. It's like filing your taxes. You can go ahead and do your own taxes. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want your taxes properly done, especially if your situation is more complicated, like perhaps you may have businesses, you may have property, you may have this, it's always wise to have a professional do it for you. I say this because as an advocate and a professional in this world of disability and advocating for people with disabilities, I've seen time and time again unnecessary hardship and the prolonging of the process unnecessarily because education wasn't, in the forefront and collaboration was just not there. Hence, social responsibility was not practiced. It's great in other areas, the whole social responsibility and other factors, diversity education and all that kind of thing, that's great. But still to this day, when it comes to this very particular aspect of people with, chronic conditions who have worked for 20, 30 years, 20 years maybe, find themselves in these conditions and predicaments, I'm telling you, the system is not there for that person. And I've seen
bankruptcy,
this.
right? Bankruptcy.
Yes, they do. We've seen people kill themselves, and worse, we've seen people die through the process. We live in a first world country, not third world or fourth world, but unfortunately, these things do happen. And going on to what Lori was saying, to really, really hit home the message of the social responsibility, educating all the parties involved as to what options are available and what can we do for this person now that they are not able to go back to work. There is remedy. Let's explore it and let's discuss it and see how we can work it now in this other phase of life that this person is now entering into.
Trace, somebody said to me recently, it's treating somebody like a human being. Really, at the end of the day, that's what we're doing, is we want to be able to, because we don't know when we may be in that situation. At what point, Susana, should we refer people to you to have those conversations? Whether it'll go anywhere or not will be between you and that person. What is our trigger for saying, I think we should have that conversation over here?
Right. Anytime that a person is starting the process of long-term disability, I believe that conversation should be had, saying, there will be attempts, to try to get you back to, the routine, your work. However, if for whatever reason this doesn't work, there's other options. And you could get into the options very, very, briefly, or you can get into details. However, the point is, when the person has a disability or they have a condition where they need to apply for the LTD, the long term, I believe at that point, the person should be aware of resources, what the situation may entail, and what options they have if they find themselves in this predicament. And stakeholders should be involved or aware of this too, meaning the claimant, doctor, the employer, and of course, the insurance provider.
And as we talked about earlier, even when somebody is on a CPP-D and they are still contributing in some way, so at age 65, there will be something there. The contributions, though, from the employer, Chantel had a question. If there's no employer contribution going into Canada Pension Plan with regards to that employee who is now off on a disability, is the remedy, should we be consulting the employers to put money into a group RSP instead as part of that financially responsible planning for these kinds of events?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. And that is a key component to the whole picture. There's many facets to it that I kind of touched on previously. This is also another one. Again, when the person comes into that whole disability world and they're, now getting onto LTD and so forth, the conversation should start there as to how they can start now planning and strategizing for their retirement. What can they do? Many options may be available. For example, the RSP contributions. There's a million and one things that, that could be done. Every case is unique depending on the situation with the employer, what their benefits are, and so forth. But conversation has to begin right at that point when the person is, going into LTD or they started that, phase of life, if you will, they're on LTD, they have to start looking into those facets, those matters, so that, when the time comes, they're set, more or less, and not destitute or bankrupt.
Exactly, or having to depend on family members,
Right.
as a bit of a charity case. Conscious of coming to time, I think I will ask this last question, which I think is a pressing question from us as advisors and consultants in the field. What is your opinion on a disability program under the group policy being taxable versus non-taxable, considering the Canada Pension Plan disability will be taxable?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, the disability, Canada Pension Plan disability benefit is taxable. It's considered as an income. And this is a question really that is very unique to the person's financial situation in terms of their income, where are they indexed, and so forth, where your financial advisor, if you have one, would play a role in helping you figure that out, what would be the pros and cons and so forth. In terms of my opinion, well, it's dependent on the person's circumstance, and also, are they married? Do they have a spouse, that has, a fairly decent income, or maybe they don't have a spouse, and so forth. It's very unique in those regards. But technically speaking, yes, the CPP-D is a taxable income, and there are tax repercussions when you have a benefit that's not, that doesn't have a taxable. There are other repercussions, where perhaps you may not be able or eligible for other programs, if you will. If you understand what I'm saying, like the disability tax credit, you really benefit from it, if you have a taxable income. So there's a lot of variables, again, that play into this picture, which is unique to the person's circumstance. I hope that answered your question, Lori.
It really does, because it comes back to that education, creating a better relationship with employers. As anybody who knows me, I'm fond of saying we all can be a choir and talk to employers to say, hire to retire. If employers have a mindset that when they hire somebody, the expectation is that somebody is going to retire with them, and they're not into that churning of employees and that turnover, that helps build this mindset of, okay, if we're hiring to retire, then we're also going to look at all of these facets of the employee journey. We're going to look at what it looks like when I hire them, what it looks like if they become disabled, what it looks like when they retire. And that just creates a much stronger mindset. Susana, I can't thank you enough for coming in today. Thank you, everybody, for these phenomenal questions. These are really good. I can see, again, I'm going to have to, I'm going to be the charity case, Susana. I'm going to say, you know what, I would love to have you back in the fall, because we're going to have time to process this information. We're going to have time to talk to employers and engage with employees and build that messaging, which is then going to cause us to have more questions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I always appreciate having the opportunity to explain these things. It's the elephant in the room, we're all healthy. We never think of the inevitable. As sad as that sounds, even myself, I could get hit by a truck and become, not able to, go on about, my daily activity. It's the fact of life. These things may happen, and it's important that we be aware and know what our options are.
Oh, you said it well. We don't want to be stuck licking stamps. Not that that's a bad job if that's your job, great, but there is a water thing for it now. But thanks everybody for coming in. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you come back next week. Next week is our last session of the season, where we're celebrating SHifT. And what we're doing is we're pulling in an author to celebrate her best-selling book on a technology, on OneNote, if you can believe it. She wrote it as a story. She wrote it from the perspective of a user, and it is doing phenomenally well. So we have an opportunity to celebrate SHifT, and I hope to see you back, and take care of yourself and have a great weekend.